Oh, is it started? I'm not getting the live. Hello, there it goes. Hello, Ivana Taylor here from DIY Marketers, and I want to welcome you all to our DIY Marketers Masterclass. I am with Denise Wakeman, and I'm jumping up and down for two reasons. One is that it's 2 p.m. Eastern, and the sun that I was telling you about, Denise, there it is. It's happening. I'm here with Denise Wakeman, who is our online expert creator. Hello, Denise.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I was just telling Denise and everyone else, I've been following you since about 1998, back in your Blog Squad days. So, you know, we're going to be talking about building and your online, not reputation, but becoming an expert online, your online visibility expert, and that's who you are. So why don't we just jump right into the content and talk a little bit about your history, because you started very early, like I think I saw 1996 or something?
That's correct, yep.
All right, well, fill us in.
Fill us in. Okay. It's a long story, but I'll try to, just cut me off if I'm wandering too much. Yeah, I started working online in 1996, and it's because my former husband and I started a coaching business, a business coaching business in rural Canada, and we had to go online because we were in such an isolated area. We were like 45 minutes from any decent-sized town, and we quickly realized that we were going to have to, use the web if we were going to get any business, really. And we had one phone line, one dial-up phone line at the time, so that was a bit of a challenge, but we didn't know anything else, obviously, because there was nothing else. And I realized really as soon as I started working on the web and doing research and just trying to figure out what people were doing and how they did business on the web, it was the early days, and I realized that I had come home, like that this was the medium that worked perfectly for me. I'd never been an entrepreneur. I'd always had JOBs and all that stuff, but as an introvert, it was the perfect environment for me because I could choose when I was active. I could, go offline if I needed to recharge, and I just fell in love with the web, and it just was a natural for me. So I've kind of been doing that ever since, and I've had a lot of different, maybe 3 or 4 different forms of business, forms of my own business since then. So.
Awesome. So talk a little bit about maybe some of the lessons that you've learned about what it takes to build your online visibility. Or maybe, start with that. What were some of the top lessons that you learned, your maybe criteria? What have you got to have in order to even begin?
Okay, well, this has all evolved over the years. When I started working online, there was no social media. There were no social networks. Most people didn't even have a website. So it, very quickly, obviously, if you wanted to get found on the web by anyone in the early days, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had to have a website. And at the time, they were very static, but that's what people had. And we had a website up and running by 1997, and it was very simple, a few pages and, kind of brochure style, but that's what people did. The next thing that came along, or that I, became aware of, was that you needed to have an email newsletter or an e-zine, and immediately, applied that, because what I was doing was looking what other people were doing in our industry, and it was a new industry, business coaching, and so I found a few people who were doing what we wanted to do, and I just started modeling what they were doing, like immediately. I would say, oh, that guy's doing a newsletter. We have to do a newsletter now too. We have to start building a list. And so, getting an online presence was about building a site, starting to build a list, and really creating that relationship with people on your list by sending out useful content on a regular basis. That has not changed.
I was just going to say, those are the kinds of things that have not changed. The idea of building a relationship, of building engagement with people, has changed.
Right. I mean, I've been doing this 18 years. I would say this exact same thing now, right? You need a site, which now would be a blog site.
Okay.
Blog is like one of my previous businesses was a blogging expert and teaching people how to blog and training. And now I would say you have to have a blog site. Mm-hmm. I would say you also have to have an email, your list, some kind of list that you're building in some way, shape, or form, whether it's with an email newsletter or blog updates or just occasional random updates that you're doing with news and valuable content. And that's what I consider to be the foundation for building a visible online presence. That's the foundation where you have to start.
And that's great. This is a great point, because what we're talking about now is infrastructure and the technological foundation. Why don't we talk a little bit about the brand building messaging component? Because you can have all the blog and the social media channels, and I always say, and tell people what exactly. So talk a little bit about the messaging component and what people have to have as part of, how do you actually build the core of your brand for online?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do that. And I don't consider myself a branding expert by any stretch of the imagination, and I also believe that it's evolving. It's not that it's just, this is my brand and then it stays there forever. For some people that may happen. For big corporations, that's probably going to happen. But for the solo professional, the small or micro business owner like I am, like you are, like most of the people who connect with me are, it's going to be an evolution. So what I advise is, you got to know what it is that you deliver and what it is that makes you different from others. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of the same things. I mean, there's like a gazillion people doing blogging and social media consulting. Most haven't done it as long as I've been doing it, but there are a lot of people out there. And you need to know who your audience is. So that's where you start to develop what the messaging is. And then once that messaging has evolved or come together, at least for that time frame, then it's about being consistent with it. So, and consistency is not just how often you write a blog post or how many times you update Facebook. It's about how consistent is your look. What are your images look like? What's your profile picture look like? And being consistent with that as well, because a lot of people are all over the place. And so it's hard to tell exactly what the message is. And, honestly, my message and my branding has evolved a lot over the last, 2005 is when I started the Blog Squad. Then that started sort of evolving after 2009, and in the last 2 years it's evolved again. So there's been an evolution in my own business as I tweak things, as I discover more of what I want to do versus what I don't want to do anymore. And so my biggest advice around that is, like, it doesn't have to be in stone. Things change.
I completely agree with you, because I've been through the same thing myself. When I started DIYMarketers, it was back in 2008, and people, at least my audience, the people that I was interacting with and my clients, really were always asking me, even how is it that you're able to do all this awesome marketing stuff and look so big when it's just one person? And here I was using all these different technology tools and just tools and technology really is all it was.
Right.
But people didn't realize that these things were out there. And so that's how I started DIYMarketers, to share those things. But then, probably about a year or so ago, things had shifted. And the questions people were asking me then were, oh, there's so much to choose from. How do I pick what's right for me? And so I went from, for lack of better words, pushing things out to teaching people how to focus, focus, focus.
Right.
So talk a little bit about, because I think this is really important for our viewers, talk a little bit about how you recognized that it was time to shift, and maybe talk about your evolution and how you've been shifting your brand.
Okay, well, in the last, I'll talk about the last couple of years because that's the most obvious, and that people who've been following me for a long time. I mean, you said, it's been since 2008 or something, and so you see what's going on. You might not really know, well, why is that happening? And I don't tend to, broadcast a lot of that stuff, but it's been a gradual shift. So. For me, I've been doing online marketing for 18 years, and that has evolved. All the technology has been evolving. So what I do for people and with my clients isn't that different. It's more how I position it and how I talk about it now, and how I want the people who are attracted to working with me, how I want them to look at their business as well. So about 2 years ago, I was feeling kind of stale and bored with what I'd been doing. It's the same old, and every entrepreneur and small business owner goes through this. It is so normal to feel that way, because I love what I do, really. I was just feeling bored. And at that time, I went on, went to Peru, and I did a 7-day trek to Machu Picchu. And I went with that I'm very close with. We'd run together a couple of times a week. We've known each other for a long time. Four of us went on a trek. And this was a vacation, nothing, it was just a vacation, something I wanted to do for a long time. It was amazing. It was fabulous. It was the most incredible transformational trip I ever went on. And a lot of it was that I realized how important that exploration and travel was for me, and that adventurous piece was for me. And when I started looking, really closely at why that was coming up for me, is that it had been part of my life for my whole life. The obvious is I've been traveling for my whole life. My family always traveled, and as an adult, I was traveling a lot. I've lived in other countries, all that. So there was that obvious piece, but also I realized that the way I approach business is like an adventure too. I'm always testing, I'm always exploring, I'm always experimenting, I'm trying stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can't get too attached to stuff. I learn stuff that I don't expect, and that's very much like travel, right?
Exactly.
So I was really jazzed, because those things were bubbling up in me. And I was so enthralled with Peru that I went back 3 months later and did another, I'd become friends with the guide from the trek, so I went back and spent another 10 days and did a whole lot of other stuff with him. He took me to some places. He took me to some rural tourism, not rural tourism sites, but to a village where they were building a community homestay program. Stayed there, got to know these incredible women who were like creating their own entrepreneurial lives. And when I came back from that, it was just like, okay, the universe, if you want to say that, has spoken. I need to put together my business and adventure. I need to find a way to put that all together, because the message is the same whether I'm in business, whether it's life, whether I'm going on a run in a new place with friends, whether it's going to Machu Picchu or going to India like I just got back from. And how can I put that together? And I started changing my messaging around my business. I started referring to business and life as adventures and building your visible platform as adventures in visibility, because that's what it is. You've just got to try stuff and go for it and go walk down that path and see what happens. So that's, I know, kind of long-winded, but that's how it happened.
Here are a couple tips that I've heard that I'm going to summarize for folks, right? So the first thing I heard, especially for a small business owner, and especially if you're a subject matter expert like so many of us are, is to really pay attention to what's going on in your world, which is what you did here. Here you were just living your life, going on your vacation, but you've kind of really taken that on as the context for your business. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about that is that by focusing your messaging around that, you're actually attracting people who are also eager to take on their business as an adventure.
Right.
Which
right. And,
I just absolutely love. So the tip is, I guess, I'm going to shift around a little. I just can't find the right angle with this light. So the shift.
Oh, you look fine.
The shift has to be then to sort of pay attention to what's going on and what's going on inside you, because you are the expression of your brand.
Right, right. And the thing is that and as a small business owner, solo business owner, I have that luxury and ability to pivot if I need to. And the key here also is that I didn't change my business. I'm still, consulting and working with clients on the same things about helping them build their platform on the web and what needs to happen all around that, whether they're launching something or whatever. But I'm changing the language about it. And I'm changing the visual imagery that I'm using, because I take a gazillion photos, and so now all my imagery is around places like Machu Picchu, and I use those pictures to explain or to create metaphors around business and adventure. And now I have 1,000 pictures from India. I just got back a week ago, and so you'll start seeing more India pictures in my messaging too.
I really love that. So maybe you can give us from some of the clients that you work with, maybe you can give us some tips around how to start translating, like how do you even begin? How did you start shifting into this new adventure? Did you just kind of go all out, or did you experiment? And how did that actually, like, let's say I want to do something like that, how would I begin?
Okay, well, there's the throw the spaghetti on the wall version, which is probably closer to my version, but
well, that's reality, right? Yeah. We're going to start, like you said, maybe you've even taken it on for yourself, right? The whole idea of adventure. It's adventures and trying new things, right?
Exactly. And as some, I interviewed Jason Weiser yesterday about launching a podcast, and he said something that was really important to understand, is that you use your own business, to prove a concept, or, as a sandbox to try things in. So if I wasn't doing it for my own business, I got to figure it out first before I can advise somebody else to do it, right? And then I can offer a streamlined approach versus my, like, oh, let's just change everything, which is kind of the way I went. I mean, it took time, but the easiest way was for me, and that anyone can really do, is to start, putting out the new messages with the new visuals. So I had all these pictures, and we know visual marketing is huge and has been for, the last couple of years, and will continue being that, in the foreseeable future. So I just started using my pictures, and I also created a new kind of brand in that, and called it Adventures in Visibility. And there's some subtle things in all of that too that I can explain later if you want. But I started using that as a hashtag.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yes.
and Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, Instagram. So I just use that everywhere. And I also started, for things that weren't business related, I would say adventure in running, adventure in eating, adventure in, India. I branded all my pictures from India that I was posting on Instagram while I was away, adventure in India, so that there's still that consistency. So you figure out what that consistent thing is going to be, and you can start the evolution that way. I started finding quotes. I started posting quotes that were about adventure, about what we learn about adventure. So, it was like just starting to drip new ideas and concepts into my everyday activity. So that's a good place to start.
That's fantastic. And the other thing I love about what you're saying is how natural that is, right? So you can see things as non-adventurous even. So now your whole context, everything you look at through the world speaks through this idea of having an adventure. So as a small business owner, you really have to take a look at, and I always tell people, it's all really about who you're being, not so much about what you're doing. So who you're being is this adventure, and now you see adventure everywhere, whether it's inside of your business or inside of your personal life.
Exactly.
Right? So likewise, let's say I had a client that was they were a financial services company, needless to say, very detail-oriented and very sensitive to time. And so they really embrace that, and I think it's fantastic because you wouldn't want your financial services company to be careless.
No. You want them to be detail-oriented.
You want them that way, and so and they kind of, like a lot of professionals tend to do, people like CPAs or engineers or the folks who are detail-oriented, sometimes they've been scoffed at for maybe not being gregarious or flighty or whatever word you want to use. And here, these folks really embrace that. And I think that was a shift for them when I forced them, encouraged them. When I encouraged them to really embrace that side of who they are, because that's what their customers really wanted to see. So So that's
and I think that it's, you don't have to. Well, first of all, you should never try to be somebody you're not. I am a much more pragmatic, a little more serious. I do like to have fun, and I'm showing that more now. Once I realized I could, once I started meshing the business and life, it's like, because I have fun. I have a lot of fun, and so when I said, okay, I can shed that, like the suit and that sort of thing, that I can bring that into my online presence too. But your point is excellent in that, for a industry that maybe you don't want to be goofy, but you can inject humor if that's who you are too.
Exactly.
You can show the humorous side of making financial mistakes or bad addition, or I don't know, but you get what I'm saying, is that there's ways to bring your personality in, because you might be a really funny person who happens to be a financial planner, and maybe it's by doing cartoons that make fun of financial planners, something
exactly.
like that.
Exactly. I think that's a fantastic point that you're making. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of your strategic tips, I guess, for being visible. A lot of people say to me, do I need to be everywhere? Do I need to be doing everything? And I tend to tell people, well, depending on kind of your business, right? You and I are in the business of being visible, so it makes sense that we are everywhere. But I'm sure you, probably like me, we do have our favorite platforms. I tend to gravitate towards Twitter and Google Plus, and maybe some other folks will gravitate towards LinkedIn or Facebook. What kind of advice do you give small business owners who are maybe torn around where they should be present?
Well, I think that it starts with where's your clientele, or where are your customers? Because you may like Twitter, but if nobody, none of your customers are there, then, you're just going to be playing. It's not strategic. It's not business. You're not getting business. You're not selling anything, and let's face it, we're in business and we need to make sales. You can't, don't shove that under the carpet. So you need to know where your customers are first, and then, spend the time where they are. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, yeah, you've got to be everywhere. And because that's, how it worked. And there weren't as many social platforms as there are now.
Everywhere was like 3 places. Now
Yeah.
everywhere could be a lot.
Yeah, a lot. So now it's, what I advise is, first of all, take a look at where your customers are, and then which platforms of those are you the most comfortable with? Where do you naturally gravitate? Because if you're forcing yourself to do something, you're not going to like it, you won't do it, you won't be consistent. So if you're naturally gravitate towards Facebook, then great, use Facebook, but you need to learn how to use it, strategically, so that it's not just a time suck for you. LinkedIn is, a business networking site, and there's a lot of great strategic ways to use LinkedIn, and they're getting more and more like all the other platforms. So make sure you're posting images there now.
Yeah, exactly.
And you also use social dashboards to help you with that, help you manage that, because otherwise it just takes too much time. And you'll be jumping all over the place and losing track of where you should be and what you're doing. So that all sounds kind of vague, but without, you need to really take a look at what your objectives are, where your clients are, and what you want them to do, and how you're going to ask them to do that, and how you're going to deliver value in a consistent way, and then make a commitment to it.
That's a fantastic point, where your clients are, what your objectives are, and then I love that you said otherwise you're just playing, right? So I tend to break people up into sort of marketing styles, right? And I teeter between being more of a relationship social style and a content person, because believe it or not, I'm actually shy. So I love creating content and I love being in relationship, but then the downside of that is that sometimes I like to be so social that I forget to move people through a funnel.
Right.
I forget to move them through the objective spaces. And so I think that's really important, what you said. So I just brought up a mistake that a lot of people make, right, which is participating in platforms and being visible without actually moving people through a funnel. What are some other mistakes that you see people making, and then how do they overcome them?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is that they do not focus on their own virtual real estate. They think that they can do everything on social networks, and that is a huge mistake. I don't think I'm biased about that. I think I'm realistic about that. Well, I know I'm realistic about that. I'll just say it. Without having your own site and content posted on your site, you are just giving away your content to other platforms that you don't own or control. And if you just post on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google Plus or Twitter, you're just giving them your content. They're getting all the value and benefit from it. You need to have your own virtual real estate, preferably a blog combined with some static pages on your site that tell people what you do and how you do it and can move them through that funnel. But in my world, how I look at it is that you have your hub, which is your blog, mm-hmm. right? And then you have your social networks where you meet people, you have fun with them, you offer them value, and then your hub, your foundational spot. Because that's where you can get them on your email list. If you've delivered enough value, you can invite them to do that. Many will, and then you can maintain a relationship that you own and you control versus, one day your Facebook, page is shut down or something. It's
Exactly.
just, or Twitter, it goes on the blink or whatever. You need to have your own thing. And a lot of people, I don't want to do that. It's too much trouble. It takes too much work. I don't have time. It's like, well, do you have time to market your business?
Exactly. That's such a great point because and that's one of those things that we learned early on, which was always have your blog be your hub, almost like your home, and then you go and you invite people and bring them into your home.
Yep.
So, there's been an ongoing conversation around email or not email. And I was just kind of curious where you fell on that spectrum, right? Because we all can agree that or maybe we can't, but that it's not so much about the quantity, but it's about the quality that you have and the engagement. So share a little bit, and like you talked about bringing people in, getting them in the email list. How do you keep people engaged? How do you keep, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Email is not dead. You must be using email if you want a viable business, because you are fleeting on the social networks, and there is so much distraction going on the social networks. But when somebody receives an email from you, that is the only thing they're looking at. They're looking at the email in their email box. There is no Twitter going by, there's no Facebook going by, there's no nothing. It's just you and their email. Now, how you get them to engage with that, that's an ever-evolving thing, and I'm not sure I have the answers right now because it's changing so much. But typically you want to be offering value, but you also have to have calls to action because you have a business. And if you ignore the calls to action, and people are very uncomfortable with doing that, but if you ignore that, people won't do anything. They say, wow, this person is so nice. This person is so generous. Oh, I just love this person. She's so wonderful because she gives such great value. But they don't buy your stuff. They go buy somebody else's stuff because that person said, buy my stuff.
Exactly. So what do you see? It's trend season, Denise, and you kind of started talking a little bit about it. What are some of the prevailing trends that you see out there?
I'm not a very good trend person. I don't think, but I do see that. I think that the whole visual marketing thing is just going to come on even stronger, and that it's going to be important to match your visuals to the platform, which means more work. Sorry to say it, but that's
more work.
There is no easy button for this visual stuff. There are tools that make it much easier than it used to be. Like Canva and PicMonkey are two tools that I use every single solitary day, and they do help. But every platform is different and has different dimensions that are optimal and all that stuff. So staying on top of that is going to be important. Gee, I should have thought about this ahead of time.
Really, why don't I jump in? I'll tell you, I want to jump in and tell you, I just did one of the things that I've heard is that this long post is really popular, and I've just been messing around with that a little bit, and can I just tell you, it took me hours, not just to write the content, which has to be, it's no longer good enough to just throw stuff up there, forgive me for saying that. That's no longer good enough. You really have to think your content through. I had to add these visuals. It took me forever to create them all. The screenshots, the canvas, the interchange between practical how-to graphics versus entertaining graphics that are shareable. I'm still experimenting with that. So I think there's also this idea of certain kinds of content, that if you're going to be relevant coming up in the next year or so, you've really have to adjust how you communicate your expertise inside of that content. And I'm not going to kid you, I'm finding it really challenging. It's a transition.
Well, and I think you're right there, is that people want meat when they read your posts, and also you want them to share it. So what's going to help them share it? That is the images, because that's what everybody shares now, right? So, I call that micro content. And so you want to be able to create easy ways for people to just grab that little piece of content, which could be a quote image, it could be a tweet, so using a tool like click to tweet and have that embedded in your blog post. I mean, I always use those when I see them on posts that I like. I will always do the click to tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of reasons why. One, it's content I don't have to think about that I can share. But two, I know what it takes to get your content out there, and I like to help my colleagues. I mean, I know that sounds a little it's just how I think. It's like, oh, I want to help this person.
Well, you did a great example of that for your Hangout the other day. You sent an email and you had an easy click to tweet. And actually, I participated in another event, and the person had made a request. Well, write a blog post, tweet about it. And I'm like, if you send me a package that contains, what do I call it? Cut, paste, and click. You send me something that I can cut, paste, and click, and I am all over it. But if you're going to make me create content to promote your stuff, that's going to be...
Doesn't work.
It just really doesn't work.
Yeah.
And, there's a great tool that I've been using. It's a plugin that I put on my WordPress site called, I think CoSchedule has partnered up with Click to Tweet, or I don't know how that works, but I use theirs, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I use that too.
Love it, love it, love it.
I use that plugin as well, and it's just you're making it easy for the people who love your content to share your content, and that's what it's about. The more eyeballs that get on your content, the more opportunity you have, and that's what it means to be visible. You have to make it easy for your audience to create the visibility for you. So you have to give them that micro content that they can share, whether they're sharing it on LinkedIn or they're sharing a picture on Facebook or Twitter, whatever. You have to make it compelling. And if you're, for example, on Twitter, you got to start putting images in your tweets now, because those are the ones that stand out. Whether you're using the native Twitter client, going online to twitter.com, or you're using a tool like Hootsuite. When I'm looking at my lists on Hootsuite, the ones that jump out at me are the ones that have pictures, and the ones that have pictures that are the right dimensions for Twitter and aren't cutting things off. So those are things we have to really look at and be careful about. And I know that I can hear people going, oh my gosh, not more.
Yes.
I'm hearing that, out in the audience there.
And you are hearing correctly, because I've been saying it to myself as if putting content out there isn't enough. I mean, now it's a whole curation process. I mean, and like I said, when I started, I have friends who are really good at this. They're witty, and I'm not, like we were just talking earlier, I'm not very witty. I am not. People think I'm creative. I'm just not like that kind of cool, witty creative, and it's a lot of work for me. So I don't know exactly. I am looking for easy tips for you.
Well, I tell you,
I find them, I'm going to share them.
Yeah, in terms of all this visual marketing, which is so I can't stress enough how important it is to start doing that, is using a tool like Canva makes it about as easy as it can get at this point, because they have all the size templates for you.
Correct.
And I use mostly my own pictures because I take a lot of pictures, and that makes it easy too. My big request, and I've talked with Peg Fitzpatrick about this. She goes, that's the number one request, is that when you create, let's say you create an image for Twitter, and that's a specific dimension, right?
Right.
Well, I want to just click a button and it's automatically reformatted for Facebook, and it's automatically reformatted for Pinterest, but that doesn't exist yet. But I don't want to have to go and okay, now I'll do my Pinterest one, and now I got to,
Yeah, it's exhausting, and and like I said, sometimes the technology isn't so hard. It's that I get hung up. Like I said, I just did this one article, and I did this whole thing on being a hunter. So I gotta, of course, kittens are great. So I find this like hunting cat, and I'm like, yay, hunting cat. And now I'm like, oh, and what cool thing can I say about this hunting cat? You know what I mean? And like next thing you know, it's like 20 minutes have gone by, and I've gone through like 10 different captions, right? And I'm like, oh my God. So, maybe this is one of those things where you really want to take time out of your week, maybe when you're just watching TV or watching a football game with your family or something where, I don't know if other people have this, but I have a husband and a 14-year-old, and they want to watch something, and I want to be in the room with them, but I'm not interested. So that's a good time. That's the time that I take to go like looking for pictures and think about different captions, and you got to make time for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you do. And the other thing is that you don't need to create as much long-form content either. When I started blogging in 2004, it was, post as much as possible. So, 3-4 times a week, because that's what generated the traffic and the search results, etc. But I don't say that anymore, because you have to put so much more into it. And I would much prefer that someone does one good meaty blog post a week and use that extra time to create the supporting micro content that they can use across many platforms to promote that one piece of content.
Excellent point. And the other thing to not be afraid of, and I've experimented with this, and I have to say I was really surprised at the results. I have been curating content, and what's really great, and if for those folks that do a lot of Google+, you know how great curated content is. You share the link, and you kind of write your own little commentary about it. But I've been using a tool, a plugin called My Curator. And what's really interesting is you can program it. It throws all the content into my categories. And now you can be lazy, and just kind of click and post whatever the quotes are. But, I actually use it as an inspiration piece. So I might, I have these little notebooks on different topics. And even if somebody has multiple points, I'm like, oh, that's a good, I'll take those, and I will probably like rewrite them or put my own spin on them, and of course keep the source article.
Right.
Those have been crazy popular.
Excellent. Love it.
So,
My Curator, that's the name of the plugin?
My Curator, yeah, and it's really wonderful, and it's easy to, take quoted snippets if you want to use those, but at the same time, what I do is I just, let's say somebody does a list post on something, I will pull all the list items down and either rephrase them or put my own spin on them, and then of course list the article as a resource. So now people get a 2-for-1, right?
Right.
They'll get that person's perspective, they get my perspective, and it's just a great, easy way to do some of that medium content, right? So like I'll do like one meaty post, that's ginormous, and then I'll do, lots of social things, and then I'll do a little curated piece.
Right. No, that's perfect. Yeah. So, and I think that's the lesson, is that people need to find the schedule and, that they can manage and that they're going to stick to. You do have to be producing content if you want to get found. You do need to content out to the world. You can't just post it and forget about it. You need to share it, and you need to give your audience a way to share it so that it goes out beyond your own circles and your own network. So, you just figure out what you can do and stick with it.
I can't think. We are running out of time, and I can't think of a better way to end our session. The time just flew, and I knew that it would. So, Denise, tell us a little bit about where people can find you. If you'd like to share anything special that you're working on that folks can participate in.
Well, you can find me on my blog at denisewakeman.com, and I'm also on all the social networks. I also have a live hangout show, much like this one, called Adventures in Visibility, and I invite you all to sign up at adventuresinvisibility.com so that you get notice of who's coming up in my shows. I do 1 to 2 shows a month, and always have great conversations with people who help you create better visibility on the web. So that's my invitation. Join me on Adventures in Visibility.
Excellent. Denise, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom on DIY Marketers Masterclass. And thank you all for joining us today. Remember, keep leaving comments. I know it's a Friday afternoon. Some of you guys had to go, and that's perfectly okay. So keep leaving us comments and questions, and we'll get right back to you with those answers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.